A very good evening to our viewers. We are sorry for the late start. We had some technical issues, but we are back here now on Globespan 24/7. We want to thank you, our audience, for being part of our program. We want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available, and of course, Devin Bisu, our technical specialist. This evening, we have no stranger with us, a very familiar face on Globespan. She has been graceful enough to be with us many times before, and today she has also gracefully agreed to be with us. In the month of August, Minister, this program, Pulse of the Nation, Pulse of the People, made you the person of the month because of your hard work that you did at the Ministry of Education. And we want to congratulate you for being the person of the month. And that was a long time ago, but you are not there, so we couldn't tell you publicly, but now you're here. We want to say how grateful we are that your work does not go unchecked because we're seeing the great progress in your ministry. So Minister Manickchand, welcome to the program tonight.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. I'd like to, well, first of all, express appreciation. I'm grateful and feel extremely humbled by that person of the month accolade, but I'd like to dedicate it to the people in the ministry who work daily, really, really hard to bring about, manifest our policies that we're changing, as well as the people who implement daily in the classrooms. And so we have, a large number of persons across the country working to do better with education, from policymakers in the ministry and education officers to teachers in the classroom. And we're getting more and more parents on board. So I think it's a good teamwork, and we're really pleased with the progress we've begun to see.
Without doubt. And of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome.
Thank you and welcome, Minister Priya Manickchand. We, at this time, Globespan take great privilege in telling you that we passed on our condolences to you on the passing of your father.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Minister, in the news recently, of course, we see you going around all over the country and with all these things happening in the ministry. But an incident that did not go well was the interaction with one of our judges in the High Court and the deputy principal at your alma mater. I want to believe also maybe the judge was also a student of QC. I'm not sure. I couldn't confirm that. But what is your take on that incident, Minister?
So two things. I'd like us to, I mean, it's difficult for you to see a parent as only a parent when he's such a popular parent. But the judge was a parent at Queen's College. He is an old student also of Queen's College. And I'm very happy to say that I am told that this afternoon, the board had given, so Queen's College is a school that is run by a board of governors. A few of our high schools are, and they're usually very well run, better than when it's without a board. So we'd like to take all of the high schools in the direction of being run by a board. This board began to investigate that matter the moment it became an issue, and they did what the only fair thing they could have done, which is to give the judge a chance to respond to the allegations that were made. And we saw the allegations, which you just mentioned, and you saw the response, I'm assuming, which was pretty detailed. This afternoon, I'm told that the board was told that there is no evidence against the parent, particularly that the teacher or the complainant was no longer interested in pursuing the matter. So sometimes we have to be very careful. So you might have noticed my silence on the matter. We have to be very careful with social media and how it can be misused by persons who have an agenda, and how it can be, it could work to hurt children. And so that was my major concern throughout all of this. We were dealing with children. A lot of people got distracted by some peripheral issues, but at the root of this complaint was issues involving minor children in this country that we have charge over and that we have to take care of. And so it seems to me that the indication from what would be the complainant that there was no issue to pursue anymore brings the matter to an end.
Minister, I'm glad you mentioned what you said there is very loud and clear, and we are also we were following your lead in this, and you did mention that you want the board at QC to make their determination before you said, which I think was a really sound thing to do. But Minister, firstly, why did this incident make public, became public when it was an incident with, a QC deputy principal and the judge? Who made this public?
That's a good question. And that's why I spoke just now, perhaps in too coded terms, but the matter should never have been public as early as it became public, because what you got was one side and not the full story. And I believe it was mischievously made public to hurt the parent, and to deliberately mislead persons on the matter. I think who made it public would be the person who would have been motivated to make this into something that it was not. This was a matter not unlike matters that schools deal with daily, and it need not have been and become what it became. And that's why I'm cautioning members of the media too, and social media users and so on, to be very cautious with how you receive information and how you perceive the information you receive without hearing from the other side. It's very, very easy to, get misled in these circumstances.
And that's good, man. We want to put that aside. I mean, you want to put it to rest on. You said the board has made a decision that there's nothing to pursue. But what bothers us
the complainant has said there's nothing to pursue.
Yeah. But Minister, what bothers a lot of people was that this is a judge of the High Court. And if the report is true, why did the principal send the judge to the deputy and not the principal herself meet with the judge? I mean, I think, with his office, you'd have thought that he would have met the highest person at QC. And I'm not saying, whether the deputy principal is not qualified enough to meet with the judge, but on matters like that, I thought, it would have been a lot more professional for the principal to meet with the judge.
Well, I'd like to think that any parent that tries to engage teaching staff or the administration of schools should be given some kind of hearing, because that's what we want to encourage. We want parents involved in the lives of their children. Whether we want to temper the involvement or we don't believe, we want parents involved. And so I hear you, and a lot of people held your view also. And we heard that view. We received quite a lot of letters, one way or the other, on this matter, and opinions. And so people had that view also, that this was something that could have been dealt with better in every direction.
And as you said, the social media, those who speak first seems to win the case, and that's the problem we have, not only in Guyana but around the world, that those who make their complaint first, and I think someone was out to embarrass the judge, which I think is really unfortunate, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Art Minister,
at the bottom of this, we have children involved, and we have to make sure that they can walk away from this healthy and whole. And that is now my role, as far as I see it. This is over, as there's no complaint against any adult right now, and I need to make sure that the children are okay.
And that's a Herculean task, Minister, and I wish you well. But there is a quote in the Bible, Minister, and I'm not sure if you're a Christian or not, but it says that train the child the way he may grow, so when he's old, he will not depart from it. Now, they use the word he, but I guess they mean all children. And I think in many cultures, we think that role rests with the parents. And I think that is unfortunate, because many parents really they're also not very equipped to bring up a child in terms of how the child should really grow up. But I think the school system should play an integral part in the growing up of children. Has our school system failed our children to some extent, Minister?
The schools are not separate and apart from society. School is made up of persons who live in the society, who live in your community, who go to your church and your mandir and your temple. And so you see a reflection of the society in almost every school. And so a lot of people have misused that Bible quote and yes, to answer you, I do believe in Christ. But a lot of people have misused that quote to say we should discipline children and we should beat them and we must not take away licks from school. And so how that particular quote is used is sometimes worrying. I believe there has to be a collaboration. The best child or the child with the best outcome, the children with the best outcome will be children who benefit from a wholesome, healthy home. And notice I didn't say wealthy and I didn't say educated. I said wholesome and healthy. Home with parents who are interested in their children's well-being, as well as a school that is modeling great academic input as well as extracurricular input. And so it has to be a combination, of course, with good governance from central government. So you have to have a political party in place who understands the importance of putting out productive children as adults into the society. So I think it's more than just one or the other. It can't be the home or the school or the government. It has to be a combination of all these factors moving in the right direction. Sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't. And so it's always a constant work trying to fit things in place to make sure at the end of the day, these children who we're molding receive our paramount consideration.
I mean, I wasn't saying that in the context of what happened recently, what we just discussed. I'm talking about, like, you read the opening papers every day. And look, today, a man killed his wife, I believe, in Berbice, on the West Bank from, a man he threw hot something on his wife and she died in the hospital. Men murdering women, harassing men. And I'm saying this because you and I went to school in Guyana. Dr. Rose left early and went to Canada. He went to the West. But in our schools in Guyana, we are not taught that, what is the role or responsibility of a young man growing up? What is the role or responsibility of a young woman growing up? So we get all the academics, but the moral structure of society, we left it to the church and the mandirs and the mosque and the home. And that has not been happening as well. So do you see in your future, one of the role that you're playing as the minister is to hopefully inculcate that kind of thing in our curriculums so our students as they grow up? Because look at Barbados, for instance. Barbados, you can walk Barbados with all your jewelry, with all your gold, and you walk the street very freely because the Bayesian students, when they go to school, they are taught how to, respect foreigners because, of course, of the way they source their income. In Guyana, it's totally different. You're afraid to even walk with your shirt if I pull it off your back. Someone is just walking, just put hit on you and so on. Our moral values has really gone down. Is there anything our school system can do to enhance that value?
So look, there are several different issues you conflated there, but I want to address one particularly. On the 25th, which is Friday coming, the countries in this world will observe International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And the fact that that day begins 16 days of activism, which end 16 days later, I think on December 10th, on Human Rights Day. And the reason the world is observing that day is because the issue of violence against women in the world. So I'm objecting to the classification that this is a Guyanese issue. It is not. And it's dangerous for us to believe that it is, because then it takes us away from what we can do and what we must do to fix it. But across the world, the issue is still live, it's ripe, and it is something that, so violence against women, the man stabbing his teacher wife to death, partner to death last night, the man burning his wife, sounds like a domestic dispute, but it really is rooted in gender inequality, an imbalance of power between the genders. And that is something the entire world is struggling with. And so it's not a Guyanese thing. Barbados has domestic violence just like Guyana has domestic violence. Of course, they have a much smaller population, so it will be on a smaller scale. But percentage-wise, we're all looking the same way, and it's pretty grim. In Guyana, we have courses, and we have something called Health and Family Life Education, where we try to impart this kind of knowledge. And we have schools that have pastoral care on particular days and so on. But to answer you clearly, I don't believe we are intensely, and I don't believe every student is leaving high school with knowledge to turn around the same imbalances and gender imbalances and the power imbalances that we just spoke of. And so we can do better, and we must do better. So we're looking at how, with an already very crowded curriculum, we could make sure our next generations understand how dangerous, what the consequences of gender inequality is, and how we could make sure they understand that each person has value and should be, regardless of what gender they are, should be respected as a human being. So that's something we have to work on, not only the Ministry of Education, but also in the churches and mandirs and temples, and at the Ministry of Human Services, the Ministry of Sport, and everywhere else, because wherever there's influence, and religious leaders have influence over their flocks and congregations, wherever there's influence, we have to get together to make sure we turn around the way we see each other as different genders.
Thank you, Minister. Dr. Rose?
Yes, again, good evening, Minister Manickchand. I want to go back to the heart of politics in education here. You were the Minister of Education prior to 2015. APNU went in for 5 years. You became the minister again in 2020. Can you tell our listeners how you found the education system? Did APNU advance some of the policies that you had in place, or they retarded or retracted them? Can you tell our listeners what you found?
So, education, or no ministry, is not going to collapse with 5 years of poor management and poor governance. You won't see the buildings falling down, you won't see schools stopping, you won't see teachers stop teaching. So it's not as visible as, oh, this was really horrible governance and it has affected us. However, when there is poor governance, it affects the current crop as well as years to come after. And you see that now. For example, there's a serious deficit of textbooks. We're trying to purchase from a company named Macmillan, which all of you know. And Macmillan says to us, we can't sell you because you owe us since 2018. And it's going to be interesting to find out where the money that was budgeted for Macmillan went. We came back in. Schools across this country have a furniture shortage. Now, if you go back to when I commissioned St. Agnes in 2014, on that day, I actually said that we were saturated with student furniture across the country because we had taken a very strategic approach to making sure every classroom had all they needed. And we were now moving on to make sure there was enough furniture for teachers and head teachers and cupboards and so on. We came back in, across this country, there's a furniture shortage because there was no strategic purchase of furniture. For the first time since 1993, the country went without a published sector plan. So there was no plan, a 5-year strategic plan that was published that everybody in the world and everybody in the country could follow. Those are serious things. But if you want to know the really serious business we came back in and found, on the east bank of the Demerara, the APNU opened 4 primary tops. Do you know what a primary top is? A primary top is a primary school that accommodates secondary aged children because there is no secondary school for those children. Now, here's what's the crying shame about that. When we left in 2015, we left APNU with enough money to build a secondary school at Yarrow Cabra and Prospect, and neither of those schools was built at either of the 2 places. Yarrow Cabra will finish next year because we began to build it in 2021, sorry. It's going to finish in May next year, and Prospect will begin next year. Instead of building schools with money we found and we left for them, they opened primary tops. So a whole generation of children missed a proper secondary, a sound secondary education. Those are seriously sickening things, because you now have those children who graduated, who now will have to, in a few short years, look after their children, and who could easily, if we don't pull it back, miss out on the goodness that will be Guyana, because they do not have a sound secondary education. The Teachers Training College, when I came into government in 2020, was closed completely. Closed for COVID, closed because of the election fiasco, just closed. And, you know, we have had a shortage of teachers across the country and in the hinterland, particularly. That would have been exacerbated if we had kept that closure happening. We didn't. We made sure we opened the college and expanded it to accommodate now more teachers in training than ever before. So to answer you, I found the management of the sector extremely poor. And it wasn't only the minister in charge, it was a lack of direction from the government of the day, from the political party who was in government. It was a lack of vision. It was a lack of, there was no trajectory. Where do you want to go and how are you doing this year by year? We, on the other hand, I could tell you now some of the things we promised and some of the things we will achieve before the end of 5 years. And those things will have spin-off, beautiful consequences and effects, and will impact large numbers of users of the system, which would be children, in every community across this country. And so it wasn't just a minister that didn't do what she had to do. It was lack of direction from a political party who had no interest in education. I'm not sure, and in making sure there was equity and equality across the system. And that is very visible now, and we're dealing with a lot of the after effects now. So like I said, you don't see a collapsing of a system generally when there's poor governance right away, but eventually it catches up with you and you have to fix things along the way. So it made it a lot harder for us to continue the work we had started pre-2015, and we had to almost start back some of these things from scratch. And that's quite a shame.
Okay. In every country, Madam Minister, there are rich and poor, the haves and the haves not. And this system exists in all education systems across the country and across the world. Now, educators have given this 2 terms, privileged education and struggling education. It is our understanding that Georgetown has what we call privileged education, and the rural areas what we call struggling education. How you intend to balance this system and make it equal in a sense?
So Georgetown is very accessible, and because of that, it has more services available to it. The hinterland areas and the outlying areas have specific things that they don't have access to. Secondary education is not universal in those places. Trained teachers is not universal. So how do we intend to fix that? We intend to make sure every single region has universal secondary education. So in Region 1, we are currently rebuilding the Northwest Secondary School, which was lost to arson just shortly after we came into government. We are also going to be building a secondary school at Hosororo. In Region 2, Abram Zool, that school is being rebuilt brand new and is going to be finished by December. So we'll have occupation of it in January, and that's a large school. Region 3, 2 schools will be built at Tushen as well as somewhere on the West Bank, 2 large secondary schools. In Region 4 on the East Bank, Yarra Cabra will be finished by May next year. And Prospect will begin construction next year. In Region 5, in Region 4, the Good Hope Secondary will be completed. In Region 5, we won't be building any schools, but we will be looking at providing transportation for persons who live far away from schools. In Region 6 at Oriala, we're building a secondary school for the students of Oriala and Siparuta. In Region 7, we're building another secondary school somewhere around the Camarang area, or Upper Mazaruni, if I don't want to yet name exactly where it's going to go. In Region 8, we're expanding the dorms at Cato and Paramakatoy. Region 9, we're building a secondary school at Karasabai and one somewhere in the Awaranao, Mawaranao area. In Region 10, we have universal secondary. So one of the issues that brings about inequalities, we don't have enough places for children to sit in secondary schools. But I just outlined to you how all across the country we have begun to address that by making sure there are physical places for children to sit. In Georgetown, we're going to be building a brand new secondary school somewhere in the Turkine area, rebuilding the St. George's Secondary, St. Mary's Secondary, expanding East Rumfeld, expanding St. Winifred's and some other schools. We're currently expanding Queen's College and Bishop's to take in more students. St. Rose's will be finished next year. Then another issue that contributes significantly to the inequality in delivery of education and the quality of education is the lack of trained teachers across the country. So what are we doing with that? The Teachers Training College, the only teacher training college in the country is the Cyril Potter College of Education. That college was hitherto only able to take in 535 students per year. We've gone online with that college and we've done some really innovative work there. The college currently has 2,600 students. We're making sure that every teacher in the system is trained before 2025. So whereas right now we're hovering somewhere around 72 to 75% of trained teachers, and we've been stagnant at that percentage for about the last 15 years, by 2025 we're going to have 100% of our teachers trained, and they're going to be more in quantity. So in the hinterland where we don't have trained teachers right now, there will be trained and there will be more, because we've seen all our teachers who used to be able to do in the hinterland only the teacher certificate program, but they were qualified to do the degree program. They've now come on to that program. So that's another way we're looking to reduce inequity in the system. Giving textbooks to all our students and not only to the students in Georgetown or on the coastland is one of the ways, $1 billion way, to reduce inequity. We know that internet is difficult for children in the hinterland, not because of anything the ministry does, but just because of our IT infrastructure in the country. And so we've expanded the learning channel to deliver education to every single Amerindian village in the hinterland. And by the end of 2022, for the first time in the history of this country, all Amerindian villages in this country and riverine communities will have the learning channel accessible to them, because the government is giving them satellite, solar power, and television sets to be able to access that. We're also delivering, for the first time, education on the radio to students who are in far-flung communities through Edu Radio, which is something we have done. So I hope you see that just speaking about inequality is not what's happening here. We know that there are some regions not receiving the same quality and equity in education. We've identified what the issues are, and we are working to fix those issues. It's going to be a work in progress for a long time, because even as we train teachers, we'll find out we have to retrain them in certain areas and so on. But I can tell you that there is a very definite strategic effort to make sure that wherever a person is, primary or secondary or nursery, that they receive the same quality of education. So much so that we're talking about exploring how in secondary schools children could go to the school near to their home, the way you do it in the US, rather than having to go only to the top schools before they can get a top education. And so it's a strategic effort with plans that are very well thought out and that are being funded, because you could have all the plans in the world. If you didn't have a president, a political party, and a cabinet who were interested in funding the completion of those plans or the manifestation of those plans, they would just be dreams. So we have the vision, we made the promise, and we're funding and making sure that happens now.
Minister, thanks. You have been supporting the NGSA, that's the National Grade 6 Assessment model to be used to identify gifted and talented students. I think the union opposed to that. Now, my question to you, do you think this model will perpetuate inequalities in the education system?
Well, I don't know which model the union could be opposed to, because I haven't articulated what yet. No. What we were saying is very clearly we're exploring how we could make sure every school is equal. There could be no sensible person opposed to that. The NGSA could perpetrate inequalities that are harmful to children or do nothing to promote their talents and skills and cause them to thrive. So what we're looking at is how we could make sure, while the NGSA stays in place for perhaps the weighting of, or the weighting of very talented students, or to give everybody equal chances to access particular types of education. And that's not set in stone, it's something we're exploring. So I'm neither against NGSA nor for NGSA. At this point, NGSA is what we have that allows us to place children, and that's what we will use until we no longer need to. But we are looking at improving the quality of each school across the country, so that if you get Novar Primary or Novar Secondary or Myconi Secondary or Ishalton Secondary, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to come out with 5 or more grade 1s, including math and English. That's what we're looking for.
Okay, you have stated that you're building a number of secondary schools across the country in different regions. If I'm not mistaken, I did check that the government plans to build at least about 10 to 12 high schools by 2025. My question to you, Madam Minister, are these high schools will be equipped with modern technology, computer, internet, projector, and so forth?
Yeah, the cost of the schools, what would be included would be a fully furnished, technology-assisted school. Of course, those could come with limitations depending on, where it's connected and where isn't. But what we envision for this Guyana, this new Guyana that we're building out, is that everywhere is going to be connected. Everywhere is going to have access to online learning and online access to resources. So every school is going to have smart classrooms. Every school is going to be equipped with things like theater art studios and ability or the environment for students to explore their own skills and their own talents that might be natural to them, is what we're looking for. We already have model schools here. If you go to the Westminster School in Parfait Harmony in Region 3, the school is just a beautiful model school, probably easily one of the best we have in the Caribbean. They have a dance studio. They have very modern IT labs, very modern TVET labs. They have outfitted classrooms. They have a theater arts room. It's a beautiful World Bank standard school that we built there. We're building the same kind of school at Good Hope, the same kind of school at Yarra Cabra, same kind of school at Prospect. So the new schools might not all be large, because in some cases, say Oriala, Siparuta, we don't have a school, we don't have the population to build a school for 1,000 students. But the school that we build there will have the kinds of equipment and technology and environment that a modern child is expected to engage with if they're to come out and function competitively in the world.
My one question before my colleague comes on. Research have shown that due to the high cost of living in Guyana, 47% of students or parents are sending their children to schools without a lunch kit.
Which research is that?
This came from Guyana itself. Two different research have found this.
I'm always cautious with this research. You gotta tell me where you get the research from. But anyway,
I'll check and I'll send it to you.
Question first.
I'll check and I'll send it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they said because the parents just can't afford, and a number of parents are not sending the kids to school for 5 days if they have to travel because they don't have the money. They send them to 3 days or something 4 days per week. Now, how are you prepared to solve the lunch kit problem? Are you prepared to provide lunch and or breakfast for kids in schools across the country?
So right now, we just started for the first time providing breakfast for all grade 6 children in the country. So let me tell you what we provide in terms of food. Under the Barjagdeo presidency, we started providing to the hinterland communities hot meals. So all the children in secondary and primary schools. And that became a model program that was celebrated by the World Bank, the Global Partnership for Education, because it wasn't only the provision of food, it was using the village to provide the food. So it was the village that that made the peanut butter and the cassava bread and cooked in the kitchen and provided the ingredients that would be used in the whichever meal was offered. And even after international funding, World Bank funding had ended, and the irony of that, it was ended because we had become a middle income country. We were no longer a low income country or a heavily indebted poor country. We continued funding that with local funds here without oil, because it's something we believe in, and without oil money. And then that program extended into a biscuit and juice, fortified biscuit and juice program, where every nursery age child and every child in grade 1 and grade 2, so all the early childhood years, every single day, receives fortified biscuits from Banks DIH and a local fruit juice from DDL every single day across the country. And then we just added to that, giving grade 6 children breakfast every day, a nutritious breakfast along with fruit juice, fresh fruit juice in the country, and that amongst the 12,401 students across Guyana that came on to the program voluntarily. We've actually had requests from more children on the breakfast program. So currently, we're providing food support to most of our primary aged children, nursery, all of our nursery, and most of our primary aged children. And so that could only get better. But to answer your question, that's how we're helping. Please also bear in mind that for the first time in Guyana, parents receive for their children $30,000 each. So each parent, each child, not each parent, each child would have received $30,000. And so people could say all kinds of things about whether it's enough, it's not enough. But I could tell you this, I'm a parent, and that could fully outfit a child for school for the whole school year. So remember, we're giving exercise books. We're giving all the textbooks that we need in primary school, and shortly all the secondary age children will get their textbooks. We're giving all the uniform support. In primary school, we're giving most of the primary children food or some kind of nutritional support. It's just about 2 or 3 grades that are not getting nutritional support. And in the primary schools, we place children close to where they live. So children ought not to be taking transportation to primary school. What happens sometimes is parents come and ask us to put them in a different school because of where they work. And if that's the case, then the parent has to pay for transportation. But the way it's set up now is that the student should be able to walk to school because the primary school is very close to where they live. Please remember the United Nations declared Guyana as having universal primary education. That means universally, all over the country, we have access to primary education. And remember, I was telling you just now about making every child, placing every child in the secondary school near to their home. So if we were to get to that place, we will reduce traveling for secondary education also. So a lot of effort is going into making parents or supporting parents in educating their children. We offer a subsidy for CXE fees that have to be paid. That have to be paid to the Caribbean Examinations Council when children are writing CXE exams. In most of the riverine and hinterland communities, we provide boat support, and I'm sorry about that. That's someone calling and not getting the message. We provide boat support and other transportation support to get children to school. So,
Charles, over to you. Thanks,
Minister. I like your growing list of things to be done and what you're doing. I want to ask you, are there any children of primary school age that are children of ministers going to government schools?
Of primary school age?
Yeah.
I don't know. I never asked my colleagues where they're sending their children. But I know the Guyana has an option. We have deliberately and consciously introduced private
No, Minister,
education.
I understand that, but I'm saying for ministers of the government, their children who are going to primary schools, and you're making all these great achievement and all the progress within this education sector.
But there are a whole set of reasons why people don't send their children to various schools, right? My children, so I'll tell you about mine. One is in primary, one is in private, and one is in public. And there are a variety of reasons that people choose different schools. It could be closeness, it could be types of subjects offered. Not all private schools are doing the public school curriculum. Some people like that. Some people like the fact that they know their children are going to be exposed to different kinds of subjects, and that can happen in the public school. So it's not only whether the school is good or not, but let's face it, traditionally coming out of a very heavily indebted poor country type economy, when private education was introduced, it offered or appeared to offer more than public schools could. And so a lot of people chose that. Now, we have to be very careful with looking at particular private schools that do well, and assuming that all private schools do well and that public schools don't. This year, 3 children tied for top space in the NGSA, for the highest mark attained at NGSA. 2 of them were from public schools, one from Annandale and one from Kanji, Cumberland Primary. Two public school children. So more and more we see schools doing better across the country. I think the private schools, there's a predominance of private schools only in Georgetown. So most of our children are attending public schools. And so naturally, most of our children are doing well. You just saw a large number of children, in excess of 10, from Anna Regina Secondary on the Essequibo Coast, doing phenomenally well, and possibly and most likely will come out, many of those children will come out with top grades in the Caribbean in particular subject areas, perhaps even as the most outstanding student. So we're moving away from the place where only paid education could deliver, and we're seeing education more equity across the country.
I'd like your answer, Minister. I think it'd be a nice challenge to send out to your colleagues and see where the children go for education. That might be a nice revealing. And the government is doing a lot, as you said there. But Minister, one thing, I'm glad you mentioned the smart classroom and you're training all these teachers and other staff. We had recently in our program the president for the Public Service Union, and he said that a lot of public servants are leaving, especially nurses. They're going, like Britain open now, Britain need a lot of nurses. They're going there for better benefits. We are building all these schools, and that's a really magnanimous project from the government. Well, what about teacher salary? Are we going to up their salary, or are we going to leave it there and teachers leave and we have a school and we don't have teachers?
Well, our record right now is not that teachers are leaving. There was a time in this country where there was active recruitment of our teachers. People went to Botswana, to the Bahamas, to Canada, but couldn't teach in Canada, and to other countries where they were able to teach. Our teachers in Guyana, look, everybody is entitled to ask for more. I believe that is one of the bigger questions and big campaign issues every time you have an election in the United States, where teacher salary become a very topical issue. And I don't think any country could properly pay their teachers, because teachers do so much. We really can't properly compensate them. But the myth that teachers in Guyana are working for next to nothing is just that. It's a myth. Our teachers are not as poorly paid as people say. So a teacher starting in Guyana will start at more than that teacher could make at an insurance company or at a bank at entry level. And so the question is, do we intend to pay more? The president just announced an 8% increase for teachers. And I am sure, I have no doubt in my mind, that as the country develops, as we earn more, we are going to be able to compensate workers more. You know, there are entire studies and research and reports and so on written about how countries should spend resources, particularly when there's a boom of resources like oil resources. And there are specific warnings against spending in particular areas or overspending in particular areas disproportionately to the development the country needs. And we have some of the best economists advising us. And while I think it is important for us to hear the people who want more, it is also important for us to manage in a way that allows everybody to, in a sustained way, benefit more from the country. A trained graduate in Guyana is paid $188,000. So it's not peanuts. A trained teacher is paid $128,000. Untrained teachers, you could be 16 years old, just out of high school, get $90,000. And so it's not, like I said, I don't think we could really ever pay a teacher properly. My mother was a teacher and I saw what she did. It was far more than teach. She was a nurse and a counselor and a parent and everything else, pastor and everything for all those children. But $188,000 is not peanuts in Guyana. It's pretty. We'd like to pay more. I'd like to see more, but it's not what it's made out to be. Sometimes those, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that the government, as they move on, you'll have to balance the act. You said, you're getting advice from different professionals, but if there is, I know out of Florida, I'm told that they're looking for teachers as well. Maybe And of course, to get 500, everybody's measuring their pay based on the US dollars. So with $500 being paid, or you get 2,000 or 3,000 a month, people look at that. So I mean, it's a
But you know,
challenge.
the teachers who went to the Bahamas found that they were being paid more, but the cost of living was also more. The rent
Yeah,
was much
yeah,
higher. The
that is
food was
correct.
much higher. Transportation was much higher. So many of those teachers stayed there for a little bit, lived on very meager earnings, saved up, and came back home. That is
Yeah,
our
I agree.
experience in Guyana. So
Minister, when the lottery started in Guyana, part of that process should go towards education. How much is the Ministry of Education getting from the lottery funds?
I don't think the Ministry of Education, I want to answer this very carefully. The Ministry of Education does not get any money directly from the Lotto Fund. The Ministry of Education gets its money from appropriations made in the National Assembly, directly from the budgetary process. I can't say with any certainty right now if any of that at all is from the Lotto Fund. I'm sure it is because it's all into the Consol Fund. But the Ministry of Education does not receive any money directly from the Lotto Fund.
Because I think part of the contract was a lot of the proceeds from that goes towards education. Now, it's directly to the ministry or through the consolidated fund, I'm not sure, but you don't know how much you're getting from
Perhaps
that.
it is going to education, but I'm saying the Ministry of Education receives its funding only from the appropriations made in the National Assembly. I think there's a direct Lotto fund that doesn't go into the consolidated fund, if I'm correct on that.
Okay. Minister, you know, if someone says they have a small home, that means they have a home, right? Even though it's small.
Mm-hmm.
If someone says they have good children, it means they have children.
Mm-hmm.
If someone says they have a lazy husband, it means that they have, they're married, they have a lazy husband. When the president says we have one Guyana, does that mean before we had more than one Guyana?
I think it's an aspiration. I think it can be clearly read to mean that he aspires to a place where we have one vision, one purpose, and we're all moving on the same trajectory to that vision and that purpose, even if we have different beliefs along religious lines or political lines. And the purpose and the vision is a Guyana that is united in purpose and effort to making sure all of our people could enjoy equally and equitably the benefits that Guyana has, to make sure that we defend our borders with the same passion and vigor equally, to make sure that regions benefit equally, to make sure that however we define ourselves individually, however we see ourselves as individuals in the country, that we understand we are from one people and that we have one purpose and one way forward. So it's more an aspiration. I think it would be naive if we were to deny that the country has suffered from politicians who try to divide us along the lines of race and ethnicity and political parties and political theories and ideologies. And I think that's what this young, vigorous president is trying to remove. While you have your view and you're entitled to your view and you have space and you will be guaranteed space to hold your individual positions, that as a country, we insist that we can do better and that we move to this better place together, even as we hold our own individual views.
Okay. I know you mentioned the secondary
and
school
perhaps
entrance.
too,
Yeah,
Mr.
sorry.
Sugrim, and it indicates that no one had defined, I mean, people were not bold enough to say even before then that there wasn't a one Guyana, that there were different ways we were dealing with different communities, that nobody, that perhaps the people in the various places who had authority might have been benefiting or even enjoying the disparities. Here is a president who's bold enough to say, hold on, we have a problem. This is the problem. We need to fix this. And I'm committed to fixing it. And I will not in any way back off or be afraid or be shy about indicating that we need this position of moving forward together.
And there are some who compare the president's announcement of One Guyana with something that the PNC said that they had that policy but was never embraced by Guyanese in totality. Do you see it that way, or is it that, because as you rightly said, the politicians have really divided us. I think they live on the division of the people, sadly, but it's true. The president making that call, the PNC is saying that that was their call before, but no one subscribed to it.
I think it's more than making a call. You're probably referring to their PNC RIG position. When the PNC named themselves PNC RIG, people said RIG because they're known for rigging elections, but it was PNC Reform One Guyana. It was just a gimmick, because what had happened was that the PNC, People's National Congress, had become so known for undemocratic practices, rigged elections, murder, starving population, a terrible economy, poor management, scorn from the rest of the world, and all of that. They needed to reform themselves and name themselves something else. So they named themselves PNCR One Guyana. That changed the PNC. It changed from the PNCR to the PNCR 1G. That didn't work, and they had to remove the PNC completely and make it APNU, and then it became APNU AFC. Now, the concept of One Guyana cannot be just in a title. It has to be manifesting itself in action. You have to see this One Guyana. You see the president. He's in All Boys Town as much as he is in Buxton, as much as he is in Blackbush Polder, as much as he is in Ishalton. So the One Guyana has to be more than just a gimmick. It has to be more than just a name. It has to be something that is accompanied by action, that takes us into this place, or closer to a place where people could feel equal in this country. And so I am not sure what the PNC, the PNCR, the PNCRIG, the PNC, APNU AFC, I don't know what they can point to. And I'd be glad if you could tell me what they could point to show how they intended, or what was stolen from them, which idea it was that began this One Guyana trajectory. I don't remember one, and I think I'm old enough to know if they had ever done one.
And Minister, recently here in New York, before the election, there was a little, some discussion about Guyana on a meeting in Brooklyn. And the Attorney General of New York did mention that, the racism practice in Guyana, is very concerning. And they did talk about people of African descent were fired, and they're not part of the body politics of Guyana, or the administration and so on. And that created some friction with the other community in Richmond Hill, and they did have some, I think it's now that the AG is re-elected. But Minister, on an earlier program, I mentioned most of the public servants, most of the police officers, most of the military, most of the people at UG, most of, they're all of African descent. And I'm not saying this disparagingly, because if most of our public servants are people of African descent, and you have to fire someone, who will you fire? What you have. And I think our politicians seeing that as being an ethnic position, rather than, hey, if 80% of my staff are African descent and I got to fire someone, who will I fire? I mean, will I fire, and I'm not picking any side here, but I'm saying that the One Guyana, philosophy that the president really want to see happen, and you rightly said, he's all across Guyana, meeting every ethnic group, every community. But somehow the opposition is seeing it still as not a One Guyana.
The opposition has to do opposition work. If there's a one Guyana, there's no space for them anywhere else. So their biggest fear is that one Guyana becomes the reality that it will become. Now, let me say this. The opposition, when they were in government, the APNU AFC, effectively fired a black chief education officer, an African Guyanese chief education officer. They found all the leave he had since he was 16 years old and sent him home for a year on that. It was the PPP government that came back in, brought him back out, and has made him again chief education officer. And even when his time comes to an end, will treasure his skill and learning and retain him in the Ministry of Education doing work for this country. The opposition, I can go on to name people in the Ministry of Education alone that were removed. The then chief education officer that they met there, Ulato Kumbo Sam, was fired. They want to call it, they didn't renew his contract, but he was effectively, he was fired from his job. I could name a good number of persons that were removed. I congratulate the Attorney General for winning her position and winning the election, and other persons who ran for U.S. positions in this midterms, and I congratulate them sincerely. I think the fact that they won means that people repose confidence in them, and I'm happy that they're living in a country where they don't have to wait 5 months before someone and the world comes in and has to go and interfere in the U.S. system and come in and force the will of the people. And I hope they understand what that means. They are repeating positions of persons who were trying to do something that they would not have liked done for themselves or the people they're seeking to represent. The people who are speaking to these politicians are people who kept this country, who are about to rig an election, and who, except this world had stepped in, and I do mean the world, the OAS with its 35 countries, the Commonwealth, the CARICOM, the UN, really, the entire world stepped in to make sure Guyana retained its democratic status. And if that wasn't done, the people they're currently listening to would be in office. And so they have to understand there's a huge motive. And there's a political motive behind the claims that are being made. And I think if they are responsible, and I would like to believe they are, if people are reposing confidence in them as leaders, that they would be more careful with believing without investigation, without inquiry, believing claims by people who are about to rig an election and just repeating them. Now, I do understand how when politicians are running for various offices and they look out at the crowd and they decide whose votes they need, that they might be tempted to say things that are not carefully inquired into. But I hope that now that they have been elected, that they can offer to this country's people what they would want for their country's people. And that is the fairness of allowing a government who was elected by people to govern, and not allowing us to govern, but allowing the people to enjoy the exercise of their will and the benefit of their exercising their franchise when they went to the polls. And so I hope they can make that shift away from listening to and believing persons who were just a couple of years ago willing to deny an entire country their right to choose a government, their right to choose elected officials. That's what was really happening there, and that's who they're listening to, and I hope they understand that.
Dr. Rose?
Yes, Minister, I want to talk about school flogging. It is my understanding that you oppose the flogging of children in schools, but yet some schools are still doing it. What would you tell those principals and those teachers who are flogging children? Because when you start flogging children, they don't break the cycle. They grow up believing that beating somebody or beating their spouse, it's okay. And that will continue. How we break that cycle? What do you intend to tell those schools that are flogging children still?
It's a very complex issue. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be at all. So let me put very clearly my view, which is publicly known. I don't believe anybody should be flogging children, either in the home or in the school. But I don't want to, at this point, speak about what you do in your home. I think there's still space for us to discuss people having freedoms in their homes. I believe, however, in institutions that there is we have to have limits. And the country established regulations back in the 2000s where only a head teacher could administer corporal punishment, or flogging as you call it, or someone who is delegated by the head teacher, and even then only in certain circumstances. For example, only the head, a deputy, or a senior could flog or hit. And it cannot be in the presence of other learners. It cannot be all over your body. It has to be in particular places. There are defined numbers of lashes for each offense. Now, even as I say that, it sounds prehistoric and ridiculous and barbaric, and we should not be hitting. We should not be beating. But that's a decision that the country is going to have to make, and we're going to have to examine that again. Recently, you have seen all over social media different children with black and blue marks all over their body, where it does not appear as though regulations were followed, because if they were followed, you shouldn't be having black and blues all over your body. Of course, those things have to be properly investigated. We have to get to the bottom of it, and we do. And there are a number of teachers who are fired yearly when there is a teaching service commission in place for breaching those regulations. So I saw an unfortunate post tonight, I think, where the union was telling teachers, "We got your back. You can flog. We'll stand with you." Well, they can't stand with teachers who are breaching regulations. So I hope teachers understand that. And one, try not to, or inform themselves of different ways that they can discipline children without hitting and flogging. Tonight I received a report of a teacher hitting a child twice behind her head. There's a report at a school on the west coast of Demerara where the child was, there's no other word for it, but abused by a teacher. Here is what is complex about this issue, Dr. Rose. The same parents who have, many of the same parents, not necessarily in every case, who have objections to their children being beaten black and blue, will tell you, "I don't mind a lash in the hand or a lash or two in the hands, but you mustn't beat them so bad." And that's where the problem comes. Sometimes countries have to draw lines. You can or you cannot. We can't leave people with discretion about what is appropriate and what is not. Right now, I think we have very clear regulations that, if followed, would not see, I consider every lash abusive, but if we were to go with the regulations, if they were followed strictly, we would not see the level of abuse we have been seeing, and we have been seeing some. But I also think we're at a good place to examine whether we could abolish corporal punishment from schools completely, or at least offer parents the ability to buy in or buy out. So opt in or opt out. So as a parent, I should be able to say to a school that I don't want my child to be beaten. And so that must not be discipline that you administer to my child. I'm opting out of this corporal punishment business. On the West Coast, the parent forgave the teacher, and the child was so badly beaten. If the parent didn't, this could arise. This could lead to assault charges in the court, criminal charges, as well as firing of the teacher and all kinds of things. But so it's a very complex issue. It's not as simple as who believes what. It's a large, I did a very massive consultation countrywide on the issue of corporal punishment, and it was aimed towards abolishing corporal punishment. And at the time, in or around 2012, the country didn't have an appetite for completely abolishing corporal punishment. I would like to think we have changed because we've grown, so we can do that again.
Okay. I want to turn to school dropouts. The number varies, but it's still maintained a high level, and most of the school dropouts end up committing crimes and end up in prison. And these are all young people, teenagers approaching the late teens and so forth. Do you intend to extend education to the prison system to let these kids get a good education, maybe write CXE or something of the sort? Because if they get into prison without any proper education, and they get out without any proper education still, or a skill, they'll still go and commit more crimes. So do you intend to extend the education system to the prisons to let these kids have a learning chance?
So we do have schooling in prisons. In fact, there have been some nice success stories of prisoners passing their CXE exams. I don't have your record, and I am at this stage, I'd like to say I don't believe you're right to say that all school dropouts and committing crimes. Many don't. I think perhaps what you might want to say is that many of the people who end up committing crimes could have benefited from some more education. But not a lot of, we don't see a lot of young people, that many young people in jail. But I want to say we started a couple of things. Mission recovery is where we were literally going school to home to find the children who were not going to school. Shortly, we're going to have in every single high school, which is where the majority of dropouts come from, in every single high school, a staff dedicated to guidance and counseling in every single high school. And that means we're able quicker to be able to determine the children who are vulnerable to dropping out and vulnerable to leaving school and fix that, not only academically, but it could be a whole host of different reasons that a child is leaving. If we don't have spaces in high school, so take Camarang. Right now, the children in Camarang go to school up to grade 9, and then there is no school for them to go to after grade 9 because they're in a primary top. And so they will be considered dropouts. But when we build a school there, there's a school for them to finish their secondary education. We're also expanding the kinds of offerings we have at different schools. So you have a bigger, wider variety of things children can do, more TVET subjects, more interest, so a wider variety of interests. Because if you become bored doing only math, English, social studies, and science, and this does not interest you, and you know you want to be a mason at some point, then it's easy to drop out and just go and start doing a trade. So we're trying to retain them, kids, young people, so that we know exactly, or we can properly and officially and formally train them. We're also looking at open schooling, and that's what a lot of these, the gold scholarships, we have the second chance program, it's called GROW, where persons who didn't get to finish high school are now able to go to particular, either the Scottish University or Textila here to finish off high school so that they could get ready. GROW is called literally an acronym for Get Ready for Opportunities to Work. After that high school qualification, they can then access university education. And then we're coming together either with GOAL, the Guyana Online Academy of Learning, or as a ministry to reconcile all the open schooling that we have. So we have quite a number of IDC, for example, and adult education that offer to people who left school, but they're not formally organized. So we're trying very hard to pull that together to make sure we do it. Every school, every country has dropouts. If you go online, you'll see we were celebrated by in 2014 for having stemmed, well, not stemmed, I shouldn't use that word, for having reduced significantly the number of dropouts that we'd had. But we still have too many for our liking, and that is something we're going to be actively working on. Like I said, a guidance and counseling person in every high school, more spaces so people could actually stay in school, and a wider variety of courses should see us being able to retain more students.
Okay, maybe one last question before my colleague comes back on. In some schools, and I know you can't know everything, you're not all over the place like this here, but in some schools, teachers are asked to purchase school items for the students from their own salaries. And in others, parents are asked to provide toiletries for these schools. As a matter of fact, I'll give you an example and you can get your people to check it out. The school at Grove, parents, my cousin sent me this information today, are asked to provide money to buy one of these black tanks to store water for the school. What would you tell those teachers who are asking parents to provide money to buy toiletries for the schools and also to other things?
So there are hundreds of quotes all over social media, especially about teachers. If you're in any teachers, I like every teacher page I come across where the memes are real about how teachers they'd show you a picture of the government funded classroom and then the picture of the teacher funded classroom, and it's always nicer. So across the world, teachers spend more, but we should not be asking parents to provide toiletries. We should not be asking parents to provide black tanks. I mean, PTAs are useful and can help and can be helpful, but we're currently examining in this new budgetary cycle how we could make sure we provide most, if not all, that a school needs. Right now, what we're doing or what we were doing was just, every year we give X number of cardboard, X number of staple machine, X number of paper clips. And that's not strategic. A school might need, they don't need any paper clips anymore because we gave them enough last year. Or they don't need any staple machines anymore because over the last 10 years we gave them 3 a year. So we are looking at trying to determine what each classroom needs and trying to meet that need from government. On things like the black tank, I'm not sure if that was part of the school improvement plan. Every school has a school improvement plan, and parents help to make that decision about what it is. We've had some extremely good PTAs that support their schools where they decide we're going to buy a black tank so we'll never be out of water, especially places where we have water problems and so on. And so I believe at Grove, it may have been the parents who made the decision to buy the tank. Now, if a parent wasn't at that particular meeting or don't go to meetings generally, they probably wouldn't know. But definitely toiletries, we should not be asking parents for. And even some of the things I see us asking parents to get, we should not be asking parents for. Having said that, I will say this. We have a whole host of material online where we started this during COVID. Every subject has a large number of worksheets and information, and it's beautifully done for the primary levels. I think it's a worthy investment for parents to print that and have their children work it. I think it's an investment, and I say that because it will cost to print. It's going to cost to, or if they will have them work it online. but and it is an investment, and like every other investment, you have to sacrifice something to get it. I see people with 3 phones in their pockets, all with data on it, and there's nothing wrong with if you want 3 phones, but complaining about printing a worksheet for your child. So sometimes we have to make choices too and sacrifices. I would tell you that we shouldn't be asking any parent to buy toilet paper and soap, because we can provide that. It's just how we are procuring in the various regions. And you said just now, I can be all over. I'm not sure if you know, in Guyana, education is decentralized. So I am responsible for curriculum implementation and policies about what we will learn and how we will learn it and whether we will go up to a grade 5 level. But in every region, it's the region, local government, that procures items for schools and has that procurement plan and so on. Of course, we can say centrally, which we're doing now. For example, we say we want every schoolyard weeded once a month. Whether you're in the region or not, we can say centrally that every school should get 5 sheets of cardboard a month or a year, or whatever it is you want to say. But it's usually the regions that procure and deliver goods to schools in the regions.
Thank you, Minister. Charles?
Minister, I know we have come to program time, but quickly, I know you don't give capital programs, you don't give the contract. I don't know if you care to comment on the contractor for North Trumpville Multilateral that had a problem with K2. Do you have any comment on that?
None that I haven't made already. So the contractor for K2 did work at K2 that I think people can fairly say was less than adequate. When we left office, the APNU had that contract and it was still in its liability defect period, and they did nothing about it. That contractor was not blacklisted. There was nothing against him at the tender board. They did nothing to suggest anywhere, in any system, in any institution, that he should not get work. We cannot then arbitrarily say, well, this person is the lowest responsive bidder, this company, and because we know about this issue in Cato, we can't give it to him. If we give ourselves those powers, then it could be this company is the lowest responsive bidder, but because I don't like how he drives, or I don't like how he hustles somebody's wife, or I don't like how he drinks and knocks about the place, it could become very arbitrary. We have to have clear lines. There was nothing against the contractor in any institution in this country, at the National Procurement and Tender Board, at the Ministry of Education, anywhere that allowed us, or that would have allowed us to legally, without acting on a whim or what we know in our heads, to debar him from the process. What I hope happens is that, because that's not the only contractor that has done work that various government agencies don't like. What I hope happens is that every contractor, including that contractor, and every company understands that nation is a different country. Everybody's looking for better quality service. Everybody's looking for a better Guyana. And people are going to hold all service providers accountable to that. I am not the person who awarded that contract. Let me tell you how this works. The Ministry of Education says we want to repair the school. It was burned down by fire. We go to the National Procurement and Tender Board and we say, we would like to put this ad in the papers. We can't even put an ad in the papers without the Tender Board's permission. The Tender Board says, yes, okay, you can put that ad in the papers. And the ad says, hear ye, all peoples of the world, if you want to build a school, here are the specs we're looking for. Tell us what your price will be. The people who bid then go straight to the tender board, which is not anywhere near the Ministry of Education, not controlled, not managed by, not participated by the Ministry of Education. And they drop their bids there, and that is independently evaluated by various evaluators.
Thank you very much. Minister, in your closing statement, you don't have to answer this question, but I would like to hear your answers. I know you love education, but should the president reshuffle his cabinet? Which other ministry would you want to be in except education?
I don't think that's up to the ministers. I think the president.
No. If you had an input into it, which one would you like to?
Discretion where, if he will appoint or disappoint, it's up to the president.
Minister, I know that's not my question. Which one would you want? Were this to happen? Anyway, Minister.
I'm very focused on reaching some goals that we need to reach in education, and that I believe we're on a good trajectory to reach. And I believe this country is going to move leaps and bounds once we get on this track, and we're on that track. And so I enjoy doing what I do right now. I'm very grateful for that privilege.
Thank you, Minister. Anything in closing tonight as we close?
No, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity of the invitation to come here and the opportunity to talk about education. We are happy to receive questions all the time. I think you know me well enough by now to know that we're not going to bluff you on answers. We give you the answers as we have them. We are very, very optimistic that we're in a good place with a good understanding across the government. And by that, I mean different ministries. For example, the Ministry of Finance has to understand where we want to go in education before we can actually get there, because they fund those. The president has to have the same vision. And in many cases, the president is actually driving the vision. And so we're in a very good place for achieving universal secondary education, for achieving 100% trained teachers in the school system, for achieving better and improved facilities, for achieving better support to our students, for achieving more and better monitoring across the sector, for achieving a more inclusive TVET program. So we're, I think, in a really good place to, in this midterm type of year, to be able to take this sector forward to meet the needs that Guyana is going to have in this new Guyana, this new oil economy that we're developing.
And thank you, Melissa, for being with us. We want to wish you all the best in your ministry, and I know you have a great program, and with your staff, you will definitely implement it. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
No, thank you, Minister. Could you stay back for a minute, Minister? 1 minute?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, our audience. Thank you for being with us tonight. And Minister, again, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rose. Thank you, Noah. And thank you, Devin. Until next week, God bless our great